Alrighty, everyone. Welcome to another awesome day of FileMaker training. Hi, I'm Richard Carlton, creator of fmtraining.tv. So we're teaching everyone how to do great FileMaker work, making great FileMaker applications, teaching you things you didn't know how to do. Today's more of a basic day with everyone, and so I want to go through some announcements up front, kind of some basic stuff. So we got Calvin right here. It's actually looking pretty good at the moment. We'll look at Calvin here briefly, but we have the opening things that we talk about. So first off, today's broadcast is largely about targeted towards these people here. I guess really it's not even so much a beginner person, although we wanted to make it kind of bunny centric. So if Bunny is going to visit us, once again, she's here. So Bunny is sick, but she's here. Hopefully she will feel better. I'm watching the conversation. So this is kind of a bunny grade webinar. The idea is that for more beginners, or if you've never done anything with JSON, it'll be new for you. But it's going to be targeted kind of at a slower pace. We have a sample file. We got Calvin here. He's awesome. So Calvin Mosiman, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, great. Why don't you show your camera real quick? We want to see how cool you are today. Are you there? Are you cool? Let's see. Preferably,
cool.
preferably with your clothes on. Yeah, that's good.
I got my summer duds.
So Calvin's got his shades on. He's ready to rock and roll. So Calvin, before we go to your screen, what is JSON? Why do I care? I mean, it's like, you know, why I can't say why do I give a beep, but why would I care about JSON? Why should I care about it?
JSON is Java. Is JavaScript object notation. It's a way to put data in a format that is that you can talk to different platforms. So it's common between different apps, and it's a great way to put your FileMaker data in a way that other things can read it, like the full or Twilio or Google Calendar. All of those things, you can send your data in a JSON format, and it can read it and take care and act upon it.
Okay, so why don't we go and switch to the screen, because you're showing your face is just about the max your internet connection can handle right now. So why don't we switch to your screen? And we got his resolution turned up quite a bit, so I'm going to make it full screen there, and I will try to zoom in. And he's going to go slow. As he goes slow, it kind of redraws and cleans up a little bit. So this sample file is available to you up front. I want to let everyone know that I'm going to give you the link here. Here's what's going to happen in this broadcast. I'm going to give you this link. About 20 of you are going to download this almost immediately, and about 5 of you are going to complain that this button doesn't work. Okay? I will give you a clue why the button doesn't work. You are in the broadcast right now. So if you want the button to work, you would have to actually warp forward in time with a time machine. Then the button will work, if that makes sense. So we're going to take bets how many people say this button doesn't work. So here we go. So I'm going to send the sample file out. Calvin, you can go ahead and do this, right? So go ahead and start up.
My money's on 4 people.
Yeah.
So. Okay. So just to show us what this looks like, the JSON puts data in a key value pairs. So here we'll see.
All right, what the hell is a key value pair? What is a key value pair? Remember, this is bunny grade training. I don't want Bunny to be lost. I want her to be happy, and she's already not feeling well. So you have to help a sick bunny. So
you could think about a key value pair as being like a field and the field value. So in FileMaker, we've got fields, and we store data in the fields, and the values are whatever we type in those fields or paste in those fields. So the key is the field name, and the value is the field value. So here in this, and that's a metaphor for how to think about it. These aren't actually fields. But so we have here name and this colon and then Johnny. So the key is name, the value is Johnny. We're saying the name in this JSON object is Johnny. And let's go ahead and just look at we're using a JSON set element script step. Let's go ahead and look at that in the script. And we're doing a really simple script step here, just set field. And then we are saying JSON set element We're not starting with any JSON. It's just empty. And then we're saying name is the key index or path. In this case, it's the key name, and then the value is Johnny, and we're not defining a type, and it just brings up that value as what we saw over here, name Johnny. So that's as simple as it gets. We're just putting data into this to form this object, and from this curly bracket to the end of the curly bracket, that's the object. And so we could think about, and this particular JSON object has one value in it, one key value pair, and usually you'd have a lot more. So let's keep building onto this. So that was the first one. Now we're going to put two values in, and so now we have first name is Johnny, and then last name is Appleseed. So we've got two keys, first name, last name, and two values, Johnny, Appleseed. And they're side by side, so it's a little hard to read, but we'll get into, we can format them to make it a little more legible. Let's see how we did that in here. Now, if you're familiar with FileMaker and you've done a lot of using the let statement, when I first started using the set JSON element, I had this huge let statement to put it together and try to put it and fill it out. But here, we'll see in that first script that we did, we only had one key and one value, but now we're having we'll put a list of keys with their values. So each line here is a key and value. And just like we do in a let statement, we're bracketing each line separately. So we can have as many key value pairs in this JSON set element function as we want. So so here we're having two. Let's go ahead and see that again. And let's add multiple. So this is going to do a bunch. Let's go ahead and look at that before we do it. So that first one had only one item, and here now we're having multiple items. This time it's 4. Let's see this happen. And then we'll talk about defining the different kinds of key value pairs. So here we have a count is 5,000. The active is true. The first name is Johnny, and the last name is Appleseed. Let's go back over here and see what that looks like in the set field calculation. So we've got first name, Johnny, and we're setting this as a JSON string. So for most of these values, we're doing JSON strings. That'd be like in FileMaker, you'd think of it like that's a text string, a text field, a text value. So the first and last names are those JSON strings, and the next one's JSON Boolean. If you don't know what Boolean is, that just is true or false. So if we you'll notice that when this was parsed out by the JSON set element, we'll see the active, which corresponds with here, is set to true, which it took the 1 and it knew 1 means true, and put true in there. If I change it to 0, let's go ahead and save that and see what happens. And now we'll see active is false because we had it at 0. If we change it to maybe 5,000 or 500, because it's greater than 0, let's see what happens. It goes back to true. So that's how the Boolean works. Let's put it back to 1. And then this next one, a count, is a JSON number. So it will read this as a number, and we see a count 5,000, and it doesn't. When it's a number, it doesn't have to put that in quotations. If I put this in quotations, and actually we can put letters in here, and see what happens. If I say OK, it's going to give me an error because now it's not a number anymore. So I'll put that in quotes. And see, I've defined this as a JSON number. I'm going to say OK, save it, and let's see what happens. because I defined it as a number, it still is coming out as a number, and it's not saving those letters in there. So if we just had letters, I think it would just be empty. Let's try that. Oops. So here, because the value is empty, it just says, and I defined it as a number, the value is 0. Let's go ahead and back there and change the account to 5,000. And let's go ahead and, so that was adding multiple items in there. There's our multiple. And now when we get multiple items in there, and now it's when we have one, it's pretty easy to read. When we have two, it's okay. When we have multiple, it's kind of difficult. It's hard to see what's going on. So FileMaker has this function called JSON format elements. And all that it does is take the elements that are there and puts them into this legible, more legible format that's easier to read. So we see the beginning of each object and the end of each object. We see inside the key value pairs are listed. So we see, okay, account, active, first, last name. We'll also notice here that compared to this, how we set them, my order was first name, last name, active, account. But if we look here, the order is account, active, first name, last name. It's resorting the values in alphabetical order. And so we have, so we're starting with A and we go through. And if you're not aware that it's going to do that, it can be a little confusing trying to figure out what's going on there. So we've got this bit of JSON set up, and in all of these examples, you'll notice that I wasn't starting with any JSON. But if we provide a JSON object in the beginning, we can adjust what this value is. So here we're going to add to the existing value. So you'll notice in this one that we're looking at, there's no JSON specified that we begin with. In this next one, JSON set element and my scripts add to existing, we are starting with the result one field, which is this field that we're looking at. And the only thing we're adding is company, Washington Apples, and we're defining that as a JSON string. In the beginning, just for simplicity, I wasn't defining what types these are, but it's best to define it so things don't get, the FileMaker doesn't get confused when it's trying to.
It'll make an assumption, right, Calvin? It'll make an assumption based upon the data of what it should be, and then it does that?
That is true. And so sometimes, and I ran into an issue with that with IDs, whether the ID was going to be text or a number. And so I wanted it to read the ID as text, and it was in that particular app that I was working on, the number was something like 0001. And when I didn't define it, it saw 0001 as the number 1.
Yeah, because it was a number field. Yeah, so.
Right.
Yeah, so that's called casting. That's kind of an advanced kind of idea, but let me spend a second here for those of you a little bit more advanced.
Yeah.
You'll appreciate this. I'm going to zoom back out. I've been zooming in and out, Calvin, as you drive around. So, real quick, there's this idea called casting, casting. It's kind of like if you're directing a movie and you go to a talent person, whatever they call the person that goes out and casts the people. Obviously, the people who put a movie together know that they want Tom Cruise or some fancy actor in the movie, and they go out and try to get that person. Or they may not care, and they have 10 people try out for the role, and they see who works for that position. So casting in the world of FileMaker, when you define a field, like you go text field, number field, when you define a field, you must physically cast it as a certain kind. Think about where you don't cast things. You didn't cast it here. You don't have to, but Calvin opted to show that. I frequently don't see casting when I see XML objects and stuff. I think a lot of people just skip it. And so you're hoping that the software that's creating the JSON kind of guesses the correct way. Think about this, and I know most of you probably have never thought about this. When you set up a variable, right, you define a variable, local variable or global variable with little dollars on it. And you say set variable name equal Richard Carlton, for example, FileMaker has to cast that variable. You don't understand that it's casting it, but it has to cast it, and it defines it based upon assumption it sees. If it sees a date in there, it'll make it a date. If it sees a time, it'll make it a time. If it sees 100512 or 0001, it may go to a number when you meant it to be text. And so there's a whole conversation that you'll see about casting where FileMaker miscasts something and causes a problem. And that's because in variables, you cannot even forcibly cast it a certain way. What happens is when you define the variable at the time you define, if it doesn't exist and you define it, it's going to make an assumption. And a 99% of the time it does a good job. However, there are those times where it won't. And so if you clear the variable, you remove the variable. By then setting it again, it will recast it. Makes sense? And so you get into this issue where if you have one that's misbehaving as a primary key or something, you might want to forcibly cast it with a value. Like if you want it to be alphanumeric, you're going to forcibly cast it with the word Rick 500 or something, which it sees that as being alphanumeric. If you say, I really want it as a number, then make sure you give it a number specifically. So you can force FileMaker to cast variables. It also is an issue here where Calvin's showing this, he can manually cast it. So there's a comment here. Christian Jesse has to leave. Just a stupid question. JSON. Okay, so this is cast in concrete. Yeah, so that's from Elzo. Let me just check on YouTube here before I jump over. Wally, doesn't look like anything resorted. Okay, well, we'll get back to that in a second. Leal has a question. Calvin, you ready for this? Just a stupid question. He writes this, JSON format elements is only useful in the data viewer, question mark?
Well, that's a good question. I use it all the time in the data viewer. It's the purpose of it is to make it more legible, to make it easier to look at and read. For the most part, JSON works in the background, so it doesn't really matter. But in this case, I'm using it to set a field. So this isn't the data viewer that we're looking at. This is a field in FileMaker that's global. It's called result1. And so it's putting that result in there. But if you are passing data to Google Calendar or something like that in JSON, the fact that it's formatted isn't going to help anything or change anything.
Yep. All right, cool. Yeah. So you would use JSON element to create the JSON object. Is that what we're doing, or to edit the JSON object? Is that what we're saying?
Yes. Well, JSON format element is more just to see it.
Yeah.
It doesn't actually change the data that's there. It just adds returns and tabs so that when something looks like this, that's really hard to read and pick through, saying format, you can read it a lot better.
Yep.
And usually you're working with a lot bigger objects than this. And so when you're trying to figure something out, it's a lot easier to poke through something that's formatted nicely than it is to look at one long string of text. And yeah, so let us know if that answers that question.
You may, yeah, go ahead and continue, Calvin. You're good.
Okay, so getting back to the set element, we looked at setting a single element, setting two elements, multiple, formatting those elements. And now in all those cases, we were just creating a new object every time. This time, what I'd like to do is add to an existing object. So that's what this first area is in the JSON set element function. In the past, in the previous examples, I was leaving this blank, so it was just creating a new one. But in this example, I'm referencing our result1 field, which is this field, and I'm just saying add company, Washington Apples, as a JSON string. And I'll say, okay, let's go ahead and run this, see how it goes. So here's our what we're starting with. I'm going to say add to existing. We'll format that again. And we'll see we have those all those values that we had before, plus we have company alphabetically after active as Washington Apples. So the next thing, so you can, once you have this JSON data, you can manipulate it and change it and work with it. The one thing that I want to point out kind of going back to that casting idea. This, when you're typing in the specify calculation area, and you start typing JSON string, it's not going to auto-complete for you. So those options so the different options you have for the set JSON element, the best way to find that out is in, I have all your resources right here for easy access. In the FileMaker help, you can see what the options are. And so here's our options: string, number, object, array, Boolean, null, or raw. Okay. So I have quick links here in the resources for helping. So then that's we just looked at inserting a new value into the object. So the next one, let's go ahead and pull up the next script, is adding an array to the object. Now, an array you could think of as kind of like line items. You might say, if you're looking at an invoice, the line items could be an array. It's almost like a child table within an object. So here we have an account for Johnny Appleseed, and what's the array could be different items for him. So let's add an array in there. So we have items, and here are 3 items here. We've got category breads, a donut, a chocolate cake, and a baguette. And so this array actually contains 1, 2, 3 objects. They're like sub-objects to the main one. And so this arrayed data I just put together as text and inserted it. But the important thing is that I said insert as JSON array. So if I put this as insert JSON string, let's see what would happen here. So I just changed that to string. Let's go back to add multiple. So here's our here's our multiple, and so this is what we're starting with, the account for Johnny Appleseed. Let's add that array, but instead of defining it as an array, I'm defining it as a string. Will this even be legible? Let's do it. Add array. Now, I'm not even sure what so it looked at that and it thought it was a single value, items, and then that items, it sees that as one string from this quotation mark to the last quotation mark. And so it obviously that's not what we want. And so that's part where this casting gets to be really important. If I left that blank, let's see what would happen there. We'll say set multiple, add to existing. Let's insert that array. So we didn't define what it was that we were inserting, and FileMaker was smart enough in this case, which is awesome, to know that it was an array. And that it would be because it was it began and ended with these brackets. So there we have an array that's been added. Let's add an object to like a sub-object, a single object, to an existing item. And in this case, we are defining that as we're putting our object just as text together, and then we're defining it as JSON object. Let's add that in there, see how this goes. Adding an object. So now we know what Johnny Appleseed's favorite item is. He likes Fuji apples, and this is the ID is Johnny01.
All right, so I do have a question, Calvin.
Yeah.
And your internet and the screen redraw right now is working pretty good. So whatever you did, just keep doing what you're doing. Cockeyed optometrist or optimist or whatever he is, too fancy. You guys use really fancy words for me. I need basic words. On the YouTube side, he, I'm assuming it's a he, is asking, how would you get an array from a text file into JSON format, question mark.
How would you get an array from a text file?
Yes. I mean, fundamentally, when you output JSON, it is a text file. That's really what it is. So I think it's important to understand that JSON is a way of structuring text. This is my interpretation of this, but
Right.
I mean, when you kick this out, this goes into a text file. It's no different than, say, a tab delimited text file or a comma delimited text file. It's really close to XML. For those of you who know XML, there are little differences, but notice that before I said on the Twitch side, I said that this is like a very simple table dump of information. Well, at a very basic level, you can see there's a name and a value and a name and a value, and that's kind of a basic table, but it's really, if you look at it here, kind of hierarchical. It kind of comes in here, and then that's a subgroup, and then this comes in here, and then these are subgroups. So this is what XML is. This is not as noisy as XML. XML has attributes, but XML, I think, in most modern API stuff, when people are saying, hey, I wanted my API to talk to Slack or QuickBooks or a Drip campaign, or I want to talk to MailChimp or WordPress or something, right? Because it's funny now that I've had a conversation with Oregon Dean about WordPress. I've had 3 people ask me about WordPress in the last day. So integrating FileMaker WordPress is apparently a big deal. We'll be working on a demo for that. But the whole idea behind this is that everyone who's doing these API integrations is using JSON. There's almost no one who's doing API integration using XML. It's just not a thing for whatever reason. XML is used in other areas, like if you were in a doctor's office or insurance, and they have the standard way of interchanging patient data with medical and insurance things, and they have a standard format for that. That's an XML. And I don't think that'll ever go away. It's kind of like locked in concrete. But really, XML is a text file too. It's just text. There's nothing fancy. You could read it with a text editor. So very important. And then I am going to pivot briefly. Oregon Dean says the JSON format elements can be used to validate JSON. That's what Oregon Dean says.
If you say JSON format element to just some text that you're not sure if it's formatted right, it will result in an error if it's not. So if we mess this up, then and say format, if the text isn't formatted correctly, then it would result in an error. Usually when I use JSON format elements, the text was generated from some system, so it's a good format. Was automated. But yeah, if it doesn't, if JSON format elements is not, if the object isn't correct, then it will give you an error message, which we can look at in a minute if we want to. Actually, if I type something in here, so I'm just going to put something in, and then say, let's go to, I have a script for formatting the result to. So JSON format elements, result to. So now this, you'll see there's some JSON down here, and there's some other values going on. Let's go ahead and see what happens to see if this is a valid JSON object. You'll notice that it's not, but let's see what happens. So now it gives us an error message, line 2, column 1, extra non-white space after JSON value. So it resulted in an error. So it could be used to validate that the JSON is a good, is valid.
It's a good question. I'm picking on anyone about the question. It was a really good question.
So we added an object, that was this object here. And now I want to add an object to the array. So here we have the array with 3 items in it, and I want to add a 4th item. Let's look at see what that would look like. So here we have it's the same object as this one, and we're going to add it here. Now, what's important with this is that I'm saying items, and I want it to be number 8 in the items. And to define what number it is, I just put the number in brackets. And here I'm still starting with with our JSON that's in this field, result 1, and I'm defining this as an object. Let's see what happens. I'll go ahead and select this, add an object. add an object to the array. Now, this is really interesting. Now, I said it was number 8. And if you remember before, there were only 3 items. So it added the extra items, extra lines in the array as null because there's nothing there. It's just empty. And then placed that item that I wanted as number 8. So we added to his items order an apple. And so it's just good to know that if you're defining an item in the array, when you give it a number, it will add those extra lines in there if you don't, if the number's not correct, and it pushes it down. So that's good thing to be aware of. The other thing to be aware of when you're working with these items in an array is that JSON starts with counts from 0 up. And so if we look at this and count them off, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then the one we added is number 9. And that's because if we start from 0, it would be number 8. So one thing, especially for FileMaker people who are used to counting from number 1 in their FileMaker apps, it's really important to understand that if you look for the first item in a list in JSON, you need to select item 0, not item 1. Okay, so now we are going to, we added an object to an array, and the last thing we want to see on the set JSON element is we're going to change something. So here we are defining, we want to change items. We're looking at item number 8, or in the 8 counting from 0, and we want to change the field type. So here we're defining our path. So items number 8, and then we put in this period to define that we're looking at the next hierarchy, next level down in the hierarchy. We're looking at the type value, and we're changing type to Granny Smith, and it's a JSON string. So let's look at what that looks like down here. So right now, the type is Fuji, but let's say change value. And we just change value. It changed it from to type Granny Smith. So it overwrote the Fuji and put in Granny Smith because we told it go to items, go down to number 8, and then look for type, and then change the value there. And that's how that path works. And those can be really long paths depending on how big your object is. Okay, let's go ahead and look at the next one. So everything we've been talking about so far, with the exception of format elements, have been JSON set elements. And we've been building this piece of JSON here on the left side. And now we're going to look at some other items, and they take a piece of JSON and they parse it out. So or they manipulate that existing JSON. So here we have JSON delete element is the first one. And let's go ahead and look at what the script is doing here. And here we are deleting item 0. Now, if we remember from said a minute ago, item 0 is going to be the first item in the list. So let's see what happens when we do that. Item 0 is this item, the breads, or the donut for $1.99. Let's go ahead and see what happens if we delete. And so these results are being put in result 2, so we can compare the two. And you'll see now our item name is the first item name here is chocolate cake, which corresponds with the second item in the original JSON. So it removed an entire object because we said remove object, the first row in the item array. Okay, let's look at these next. The next one is get element, and so here we're going to start pulling values out of JSON, and this is really important, especially when we're pulling back it's important to see how to format data in JSON from FileMaker so we can push it out to different platforms like Twilio or Google. And once we get that information back, though, we need to parse it out and see what the new values are. So so in this case, we're pulling back. What's the first name? Let's see what that looks like. So all we did was we said, we're looking at result 1, and give me what's the first name? What's first name? And it gave us back Johnny, which corresponds with first name Johnny right there. Pretty. So let's get element items. Now in this case, because we just defined items, we got the entire array of those items.
Even though, is it Fuji at the top there, Calvin? I mean, just kind of curious about this myself. So,
well,
it got the items from the first name is what it got, right? Yeah.
It got items. It got the list of items here. Which
if you had items in a different, like under a different section, would it have grabbed from both groups or just the first group?
Well, you wouldn't be able to have two items keys in the same level
at the same level
object.
At the same level. Got it.
Right.
So these okay, so if you defined, back up. If you defined items in here twice, would it give us an error or would it just like do it but ignore it?
It would overwrite the first one.
Got it. Okay, great. So that's interesting. Okay, good. So it's kind of enforces a uniqueness name at each level. So there's a unique, yeah.
Right, and you'll see, but here though we have ID and there's another ID, but because it's in a different object, there's not a conflict.
Right. Yeah, you could have a whole bunch of names in a database, and they would be name Johnny, name Sarah, name Smith, name Dick, and then you'd have all these for each person, right? For example. So.
Right.
All right. Cool. Good.
So the next thing, so we said get items, and if we look here at that, we're just saying, just like we said, just get first name, we're just saying items. Let's see what happens if we say get items, and then we can specify which number we're getting. So here we're saying get items 8. And so it's looking at that list, and again, it's counting from 0, so 0 to 8, and it's pulling that number 8, which was the one we inserted, the Granny Smith apple.
So the first position is position 0, or we would call it 1 most places, but they start counting from 0.
Right. In FileMaker, we normally think starting at 1. With JSON objects, we're starting with 0.
Yeah, that's more of a programming thing. 0 is kind of a position, so yeah. It's
right.
not uncommon when you're doing development in other areas. So, cool.
Right. So the next thing, we're going to say items, and then we're going to say go to number 8, and then select type. And so when we do it this way, specify that far into the path, we get Granny Smith. And so that's how we can pull different values out of that object. And if you're working with FileMaker or a web viewer that's saving things in JSON, you'd use those to set the fields back in FileMaker. So let's look at list of. Sometimes you don't know what's in your JSON object when it comes back, so you can pull out the keys. So here, JSON list keys, it pulls out all the keys from the first level. So you'll see there's an items, but there's no ID from the second level. And so that's that gives you what the first in your object, or as far in as you define. Let's look at the next one here. We'll say list JSON list keys for items. So we're going to define items. And now this is really interesting because I don't see any fields here. I just see numbers. This doesn't look like anything that's over here. And what it's doing, because items is an array, it's listing all of the values in that array. There's 0 through 8. So you have the option to select any one of those items in the array. Now if we define, those are rows that we can select from. So in our next item, we're going to select item 0. And that grabbed the, we'll list keys from item 0. That brings us these. So you'll see category, ID, name, price, special, stock. It corresponds there. Now, if I say we'll change it to items 8, and now brought in that new object that we inserted there, which was the category, type, ID, price for the Granny Smith apple. What's interesting, though, is that usually when we use the idea of line items when we're talking about an array, just to kind of help people understand it, but the names don't necessarily have to be identical between each object in the array. Not necessarily. It makes more sense if they are, but in this case, they could be different.
It's definitely different here if you look between, well, the one had type and stuff in it. Yeah, this one right here.
Yeah.
Category, type, ID, price, and over here it's category, ID, name, price. Yeah, so.
Yeah, they can be different. It doesn't require you to have them the same. Usually when you're working with something, everything would be the same though. So just as we can grab those list of keys, we can grab the values as well. So in this case, I said list values. Let's go ahead and look at what that looks like over here. And it's just grabbing the values from result 1. And I'm not defining a path. And you're seeing first result is 50 or 5,000. Second is Boolean, so it's giving us the number 1. Next is company, Washington Apples. And then the next is a JSON object, and it gives us the entire value for that JSON object. And then the next is the first name, it's Johnny. And the next is items, so it gives us the entire array for those items. So so usually it makes more sense when you're at another level, at a level where there's no more JSON to see those values. Let's look at if we just select items. Now here I selected items, and we're just saying from result 1 select items, and it brings it into the entire array in here. Let me go ahead and add perform script, and we're just going to format this so it's a little easier to read. And that didn't work. So this, let me go ahead and we wanted value items. So for some reason it's not reading this correctly. I guess in each item would need to be separated by a comma, and for it to be an array, and FileMaker to format the element correctly. And it's not. So interestingly, when we said select items, it didn't it didn't return it as a JSON object. It just returns it as a return delimited list. If I say items 0, then we'll see that corresponds with the values here: breads, FB1, donuts, etc. And so that corresponds there. I can say items 8. And that corresponds with our item, our items down here. So first, we're building our JSON object using the JSON set element and adjusting those elements, and then we prepare it in such a way that we can share it with a different application. And once we submit it to that application, whether it's Twilio, Google, the result will also be a JSON object, and we can manipulate that or read it using these get element, list keys, list values functions. And that way we can not only create JSON objects, but also read and use them for setting fields in our FileMaker apps.
Pretty awesome, Calvin. I am answering questions over here. I had a question off on the Yeah, so let me answer the question here. So Ahmed is asking off-topic question. I'm going to go and respond to this because I have a video for him. It's actually quite a really good video that we've never. It was a video we shot last year, back when we would do live streams like once a week or once a month or something like that. Now it's every day, so this is a really good topic, but I've already kind of hammered this. It's about making and selling a vertical market applications, and it's a very common question that the people here have about, I would say, probably a quarter to a third of the people here making applications they would like to resell. And so this is a video I did. It's a YouTube video. I'm going to go ahead and post it right here. And we'll make sure it makes its way back into a live stream somewhere so you guys have that in the video player. But it talks about the idea. I'm just going to pop myself up here briefly. Pops about the idea of the considerations that as all the years of, I can't tell you how to make $1 million, billion. Someone, I had one of the gentlemen here, asked me, and I remember who it was, I'm not going to mention your name, and he wanted me to like, well, how do I write a great product description, or how do I basically market the application, or how do I, because if I build the application, how do I become successful with it? Okay. If I could make software applications to be highly, highly successful, and then I don't know that I would do training. I'm much better at training than doing that. I know I've done enough of these to know what doesn't work. So I can help you with areas not to get stuck on. In all the years of me building seeing vertical market applications built, a vast majority of the efforts fail. They fail because people get stuck into specific issues, right? They build an application there's no market for. They think it's a great idea, but for example, they don't, or they don't have access to the market. They would like to, I'd like to make databases for Lamborghini maintenance on a supercar maintenance, except I don't own a supercar. I don't know anyone who does. So how do I build software and then sell to people I don't know? So you have to be in the industry. You have to be in the industry. You have to have contacts in the industry. You have to have a go-to-market plan. You have to have a way of bringing people on board. Building the app, I think, is almost, in my opinion, the easy part. The hard part is getting it sold and getting it out the door. And once again, if you're building custom apps, then doing JSON, like you see right here, is an important skill set that you might have to have, because if you build a modern app and it communicates with other systems, 99% chance if you're communicating with another system, you're going to be using JSON to do it. I was talking about this with Jonathan, one of our senior engineers yesterday, because we talked to one of the other people here about WordPress, and I was saying, hey, and he goes, well, I've actually done a lot of WordPress integration. I go, well, are you using API now and whatever? Because in the old days we'd do these ODBC connection between FileMaker and SQL, stuff like that. And he goes, well, we still do a lot of ODBC driver stuff because it's easier than setting up the API. I don't know if that's always the case, but there are rare cases where you're still going to do things maybe the old way, but this is the new way. The idea is that you will get code here, or you'll get this code that comes down maybe from PayPal. We've done a lot of PayPal demos before. And this contains the name of the person, and what they bought, and then the dollar amount. And then so your job is to run the scripts over here with the get objects and get elements and get out who they are, how much they paid you, what their name is, their contact, all that. That way you can load that into FileMaker into the correct fields. So that's why creating the JSON is one thing, ripping it apart and parsing it apart is another skill set. It's important to have that if you're a senior developer. I would highly recommend you folks watch that video. If you have comments about the vertical market applications, another video like this, but it went through quite a bit of post-production, I think. That video is at least a year old, but it's totally relevant, totally 100%. There's nothing in there that's changed. The only thing that's changed since that video is that FileMaker changed the name to Claris. That's it. Everything else is identical. So Michael Gravel says, so an object of is an array of one item. Yeah, what is the technical definition of a JSON object, Calvin? Right, because it's kind of batted around kind of loosely, but
if we look in our resource here and see set element, and we'll see the object, this is kind of an easy way to think about these things. The string is surrounded by quotes. The object has the curly brackets. The array has the straight brackets. And so this from the top here to the bottom is one object, but then there's sub objects. We've got a list of objects in this in this array, we've got favorite is an object in itself, Apple ID price. And so those are the objects. Does that answer the question?
Well, probably, I think. Andre said, well, then, his comment was, well, in JavaScript, everything that is not a primitive is an object. Okay, well, that's great. But once again, this session is for beginner. And so if you use a advanced word like a primitive, no one who's a beginner, like bunny. Attention, bunny, are you here? Are you here? Okay, well, I was going to ask Bunny what a primitive was, right? So, see if she knew the answer. My guess is that the beginning people don't know what that is. So it's always tricky when you're training to make sure you use words that are appropriate to the audience. If you're talking about nuclear reactors to a bunch of nuclear engineers, it's different than how you talk about nuclear reactors to a bunch of high school students, right? So, anyway, Andre says, a primitive is a string, a number, Boolean. I am forgetting something. Well, damn, Andre, I can't have you on live TV if you're forgetting stuff, right? Imagine if you're up here like us and it's like action, live TV, right? You got to get it right the first time. So,
one last thing I'd like to show is that the FileMaker actually can spit out data as JSON. So in this case, I'm going to run a script where it says execute FileMaker Data API. All I'm specifying is what layout to look at. And if we want to look at that layout real quick, it's pointing to this names layout. And you'll see I have all this name information as well as an invoice portal. And when I say execute data API, I'm going to say execute end format, so it's a little easier to read.
And you suck, Calvin. You official. There you go.
There we go. So here we see we've got our messages and our response, our data. So here's record 1. Here's all the field data that corresponds with that layout here.
Oops, hang on here. All right, I'm trying to zoom in, but you're going all over the place. All right, keep going.
Okay, so here this object corresponds with the fields on the names layout.
Yep.
But then you'll notice there's also a portal data object which has an array of all of the invoices within that.
But there was only one. Was there only one line item in there, Calvin? Because it looks like there's only one here.
Yeah. So this is there's in this case there is only one line item.
If you had like 20 line items, then you'd have 20 of them over here, right?
Yeah. Well, let's scroll down and we'll find there's.
Oh, there's one with 2.
This one has 2.
So
items.
that's 2 line items, right?
Right.
Okay. Cool.
Or 2 invoices, and again, this is formatted so we can read it a little more easily.
There's 2.
There's another one with 2.
Okay.
But if we look at that script, it was a single stepped.
Yeah, what's interesting about that is brand new to FileMaker 19. So the execute FileMaker Data API is a brand new. It was kind of something that FileMaker had overlooked, an easy way to create this, and they added this to 19. So if you want to know a reason to go to 19, this is another reason it's got that in there.
Yeah, so FileMaker is automatically putting it out as JSON. And in our calendar and FM starting point, the calendar only reads the data because it's in a JSON array, and as well as the PayPal integration in FM starting point, that's reading it as a JSON in JSON as well.
All right, so I'm commenting back to Andre. He was talking about primitives over there, defining what a primitive is. It's a terminology in the world of JSON. He says a primitive is a string, number, Boolean. It's also undefined or null, right? So I guess is the way I have to go find the definition of that. But that's
so it sounds like it'd be anything within the object.
Yeah. Yep. So those are the primitives. So once again, there's always this inside. In America, we call it inside baseball, right? So it's like any great sporting, like soccer, European football, or American football, or any of this. when you get to really high-level sports or auto racing, it gets very complex. There's a lot of inside terminology, and if you start to do development programming, there's lots of inside terminology, and you start to get exposed to that. So don't let it throw you. It's just, it's learning something new. The reason this is useful, once again, if you want to connect FileMaker to an outside service where you send data out or you get data back in, like the calendar, we take data out of FileMaker, we send to the calendar then gives us a nice pretty calendar, right, with all the days and months and all the years and all that kind of stuff. So that's how that works. Pretty cool stuff. So we did post the sample file here, TK55678. He said, I'd just like to mention that you can add comments using the double / or the / */ like the commenting out of code. You can add comments in here. Really useful.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he said that. I guess you haven't seen that, but you can do that apparently. So coming from him, it's pretty awesome. Scott asks, when do we learn the new execute FileMaker Data API script step? It looks a better alternative than to execute SQL. Yeah, totally different, right? So Scott, the execute FileMaker Data API generates a text output based upon the current layout, right, Calvin? I mean, Calvin, you've done both these presentations. How would you compare execute FileMaker to execute SQL?
Well, execute SQL, you have more variation in how the data is formatted. So you can define what you want your data separation to be, whether it's commas or returns, which is the default. With the FileMaker Data API, when I say execute data API, all I'm saying is look at this layout and give me a result. And it gives me a result with this message response data. There's no way to change the way that this is formatted that I'm aware of.
Well, in the execute SQL, you can dip across relationships, you can put filters in there, you can do all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, and you can do that with execute FileMaker Data API as well. Here I'm not in a, right now I'm in a request table here.
Whoops, sorry, hang on. We're coming back to you. I was not on your screen. Go ahead. There you go. Go ahead.
So the request, when I said execute FileMaker Data API, the only request I'm submitting is layouts and name. I'm defining layouts as names. And so it's looking similar to the execute SQL. It looks for this table, this layout called names, and then pulls the data based on that. So if we look at the layout, names, and say open, and let's remove, what's the first value that we're seeing on there? Remove address. Go ahead and remove address from here. Save. And then execute again. We'll notice that the address is no longer in there. So it's based on the layout. And if I remove the portal, it'll remove the invoice portal as well. But I can't really tell it how I want this formatted. It just comes in as this JSON object. So it's definitely useful, and you can make larger queries with more define what record you want or pull a single record. So it definitely has a lot of potential with that. I haven't actually used it as more than just messing around with it.
Yeah, well, we did a great. There is a video on this in the 19 video training where Calvin and I played with this explicitly, and there's a demo file with that. So if you have our FileMaker training, our current bundle with the 19 video training course, then you can watch that video. It's totally there and available. So we did spend some time on this. Like I said, we don't cover everything in the live stream. To be very clear, the live stream is a very limited set of training tools. If you want the complete training, that's something you got to buy. It's not very expensive. It's pretty inexpensive. It's pretty, frankly, cheap. If you want to help support the channel, once again, I would recommend checking that out. So the videos we're talking about, the live stream videos are free, but once again, they're kind of limited. We can't really animate them. And whereas these videos are created, they're constructed, they're animated very explicitly, but we don't take in-flight questions. So that's the thing. Here we take questions. Here with these we don't. If you already have a copy of FileMaker, then you don't need this one. You just get the video only here. The difference is a full copy of FileMaker and a full special version of FM Starting Point, which is our CRM. If you're interested in these, I can post a quick link to where you can get these discounted, but at the end of the day, we can get you about $50 off. But that's a good one there. Then Oregon Dean says for debugging, there are quite a few online tools to help you understand the keys and elements of what you're doing. Oregon Dean in Twitch says check out https://JSONpath.com. So JSONpath.com. And what I'm going to do here real quick for everyone is post the links that you can have, so you can see if you want the coupon for what we're doing here, get it a little bit cheaper. So once again, the training bundles are here. It comes with a video player. The video player that's in here is really cool. People want to know how to take it apart and play with it. You can't take apart the video, effectively a nearly identical copy that you can take apart and play with. It's got some kind of advanced stuff in it, so it's definitely not a Bunny level video, although I think Bunny went home. She's sick. I don't see her anywhere here. She's normally pretty chatty, so she might be under the weather a little bit. So if you're interested in getting the complete bundle, annual bundle, which comes with a full copy of FileMaker Pro, complete annual bundle with all the training, there's the link right there for that one. I'll push it in both locations. And once again, if you want to support the channel, you like what we do, you want to see us keep going on a daily basis every day, 1 o'clock, then definitely feel free to at least buy the video only training. You'll definitely learn something out of it. And this is a 1-year subscription as well. It gets you all the new video content for the next year. So both those links have gone to YouTube and to Twitch. We really appreciate it. And the conversation, Calvin, once again, great job, Calvin. We really killed it. Good job. Are you there, Calvin?
Thank you. Yes.
There he is. Yeah, he's there. All right, Calvin, looking nice. Oh, he's got his cool shades on. Awesome. All right, everyone, we'll see you tomorrow. We greatly appreciate it. Make sure you support the channel. If you have questions, comments, anything, you feel that we should do something else or have a topic for us to cover, a question we didn't get to, even off-topic questions, send an email to support@RC Consulting. If you want to talk to Calvin, send an email to support@RC Consulting. We have a tech support team there. It's about 6 to 7 days a week. Not 24/7, but about 12, 15 hours a day, each day, and they provide coverage on that. We will send you links. We can help you if you have a purchase. If you have purchased the wrong thing, we need to fix it, whatever, we'll help you with that. So with that, everyone, I greatly appreciate it. Have a great day, and we'll see you tomorrow with UI Consistency with Nick Hunter.
And the guys just stepped up the whole way. Calm, cool, collected. The quarterback, great read, good patience. More importantly, great job up front protecting this quarterback to give you a chance. And that's all you can ask for.
Try to rally down 10. 9:25 to go here in the fourth. Short motion by Amendola from the left. Brady takes the shotgun snap, stands in, throws it left for Amendola, reaches up and snacks a high throw and lands inside the 10, rolling to the 9. Ball slightly behind him, but Danny makes the grab.